Welcome, everyone.
Wow, screening room's incredible. Is it too comfortable? I feel like you don't want to be too comfortable. Or maybe it's like not really good for lumbar because you're like,
By the way, this is Sarah Silverman.
sorry.
She's the star of I Smile Back, which you just watched and I'm probably still recovering from. Very intense. So before we get into I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt from I was about to say the Hollywood Reporter. I no longer work there. I work at New York Magazine. Thank you. Takes a while to reprogram the brain. So before we get into the film, maybe lighten it up just a little bit. I was curious to know, when did you first know you were funny? You don't get to be funny necessarily in this movie, but we know you.
I was going to say, like, right around the time I'm making the sandwiches at the end. I was young. I had a dad that had one of those dads that thought it was hilarious to teach his 3-year-old swears. And so I screamed, bitch, bastard, damn shit in the middle of Boys Market in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I got this I really remember it because...
How old were you?
3. I got this reaction now looking back on it, of course. I wasn't able to articulate this then, or almost anything at all. I got this wild approval from adults despite themselves, and it just was something I became immediately addicted to. It made my arms itch with glee, and I've been chasing that high ever since, that element of shock or surprise. And yeah, so
Did this get you into trouble growing up at all?
I did, in that I screamed swears, and
Swears
but I
is
was
so cute. You saying swears too. That's like very funny.
Yeah, it was this little hairy little ball of
expletives, hairy little ball of
yeah,
expletives.
I don't know. But I was well behaved, and I did all my homework and stuff. I did well in school, and but I acted out. Well, my acting out wasn't really the way I misbehaved. I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel confident my teachers loved it. Like, I remember the principal of our school, we had, we used to have books and not just like an iPad. We had like 10 really heavy books. And you can hear me. And I remember the principal would come, and I'd throw them all in the air and then fall on the ground, and he'd be like, Sarah, and I'm like, I fell. You can't blame me for falling. And then, like, when I'd see him subsequent to that, I'd be like this. Whoa, he'd be Sarah, no. So I like to torture my teachers, but in a way that I feel like they loved it.
And when did you perform stand-up for the first time?
I was 17. I knew I wanted to be a stand-up.
Who inspired you growing up that made you want to do stand-up?
Well, my mom had comedy albums, so she had like the Woody Allen double album where he's like in a very small club, like, a nightclub, and you can hear each laugh. It's not like a big, huge audience. It's like a little audience, and I loved that. And she had old like Alan Sherman and Nichols and May, and then I became obsessed with Steve Martin, and he was my world and continues to be. On the ceiling of my bedroom in New Hampshire, that is still there, in pencil, it says, I love Steve Martin on the ceiling. And Albert Brooks and Martin Short and Ruth. No, I knew you were going to say Ruth Buzzy. That's right, because Ruth Buzzy's in my head because I've been watching that Laugh-In infomercial where you can just sit for like 3 hours and watch it. Ruth Gordon,
Oh, right.
who is not a comedian, but I loved her comedy, and yeah.
And where did you perform for the first time?
At a club called Stitches in Boston on Commonwealth Avenue. I was at summer school at Boston University between my junior and senior year of high school, and that was the first time I did open mic. And actually, when I walked into that club, Wendy Liebman was on stage, and she did a joke about Ruth Buzzy. Nobody knows who Ruth Buzzy is anymore except for us in this room, but she has a great joke. She said, someone told me I look like Ruth Buzzy. I don't know who she is. Is she pretty?
And how do you remember feeling after you left the stage that night?
I was very excited, and I definitely knew I wanted to keep doing it, and I couldn't wait to go back to New Hampshire and have my senior year of high school and move to New York City and start my life as a comedian.
And who gave you your big break in New York to perform?
Well, it's a series of tiny breaks. There was a club called the Boston Comedy Club on 3rd Street, and I passed out flyers for them on the corner of 3rd and McDougal for 2 years, every day from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I made a lot of money. They gave me $10 an hour, which was like, and so much happened on that corner. But in exchange, I got knocked unconscious. I got choked once. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I was just like, I love New York. I did it. This homeless guy just started walking towards me, and then he just started choking me. But almost immediately, New Yorkers pulled him off me, and I was like, New Yorkers are great. They pulled him off me so fast.
LA people would just keep driving if they saw
Yeah,
that.
they'd just be like, that's terrible. Shoot it.
Call the police.
It's so funny too, because as life is so long if you let it be, and I remember I saw Timothy Oliphant at a Hollywood party out here, and I said, "Oh, I'm such a huge fan. I think you're so great." And he goes, "Sarah, do you remember me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know you. I'm a fan." And he goes, "I used to be a barker at the Boston Comedy Club when you passed out flyers." And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I had a page boy haircut, parted down the middle, and I was like, that was you? It's so crazy how long life is. Or one time at a party out here, it was during Will and Grace, was at the height of it, oh my God, I'm friendly with her.
Deborah Messing?
Huh?
Deborah Messing?
No, keep going.
Megan
Mullally. Sorry, my whole head is filled with phlegm. I had it put in.
Phlegm transplant.
Megan Mullally, I go, oh, I'm such a fan. You're so great on Will and Grace. She goes, we did a pilot presentation together where I played your friend. We did this pilot presentation, which is like a pilot that isn't shot. You just do it on a stage, And I said, oh my God, because I didn't know her from, I didn't, it's a very long life. And I was able to say, do you remember whose pilot presentation it was? And she said, no. And I said, Charlie Kaufman, which is, he was off of Ned and Stacey and got this pilot presentation. And Dana Gould and I and Megan Mullally were in it. But it's so funny how, well, anyway.
People who start in comedy have a lot of longevity, I think, because it teaches them survival skills.
Yeah, I think about it in terms of the Joan Rivers, Ruth Gordon long game. So I'm like, oh, when am I going to be old enough to be like Ruth Gordon? It's taking forever.
You're just too ageless, Sarah. That's your main problem. And actually, we did a shoot earlier this year where we featured writers from SNL, of which you were one, back in the early 90s. And I was wondering, how can you describe how you got hired on that show? Because I think you did an audition of sorts for Lauren and his team, or...
I didn't do
You
the
didn't,
usual audition. They came and saw me do stand-up.
Okay.
And then I had a meeting with Lauren and with the head writer, Jim Downey. But I wasn't the usual, like,
Okay.
do characters. Okay.
You wore your hair in like a Gilda style, I remember you saying.
When I met with Lauren, I had just read Late Night. Was it Saturday night? I'm a human being. Barely keeping it together. And but I did love Gilda, and she had hair in like pigtails, but it was down, but it was like kind of in, and so I wore it like that, and then I wore it like that for like 10 years.
It worked for you. And how would you describe your experience on the show? I know it's a great experience. It's very tough. It's very competitive.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience looking back on it, and I was so, I don't know what Lauren saw in me, you know, like I didn't get any. I contributed to a lot of sketches, but nothing I wrote on my own made it to air. And I'd like to take the stance of like Larry David, where none of his sketches got on air, and he's like, nobody gets him because he's so genius. But I've read them in the past few years, and they're terrible. Mine were they didn't get on because they were terrible.
But you were also able to act in some of these sketches too.
Yeah, I was a writer and a feature performer,
Right.
so I got to do. I remember. I mean, this is how long ago I was on. Charlton Heston was the host one year,
Wow.
one time, and so we did a Planet of the Apes thing, and
Naturally.
I was a peon, you know. I was just like a 21-year-old kid, like whatever kid they hired. So I was lowest rung. So I had to get full Planet of the Apes prosthetics on at noon so that they could get that out of the way. I had the worst cold of my life. And so I had a face glued onto my face for 12 hours. And my nose was running just down my face, and then I was crying because of it, and so then that was coming down. So I was just like drenched under a face that was glued onto my face, and I just like disassociated and fell asleep on the writer's room couch. And somebody took a picture, and I had a little coat that I got at Andy's Cheapies with like a fake fur collar. So someone took a Polaroid of it, and it's just like this ape face in a ball. And I mentioned it when I was hosting, and one of the old cameramen had it, and he sent it to me.
Oh my God.
It's the greatest picture.
That's a prime SNL story right there. What would you say is the craziest thing you've ever done to make someone laugh?
Something did come into my head immediately, but I was like, it's gonna help me in any way to reveal this? But anyway, I lived with two other women we were all in our salad days together. Tracy Katsky, who's a big wig, developed Malcolm in the Middle and then married the creator, and then Mary Lynn Rice Cub, you know, from 24, and is a brilliant, like, performance artist, like, comedian. I used to do anything to make Mary Lynn laugh, and we lived in this tiny, shitty apartment building, and I just remember, this isn't gonna go to a good place. I don't see it being a big laugh, and it's not okay. I know this now. But I'd pull down my pants and like pee a little bit outside of people's doors in the hallway. I'm sorry. I have a problem, and I know that sounds crazy, but a lot of comics do weird things with peeing, and that's one of them. That's one that I did. It's like a literal marking of my territory. Looking back, as I say it, I realized it was wrong, but it made Mary Lynn laugh so hard she was crying.
And it was all worth it.
You shouldn't pee on rugs that aren't yours. I regret that story.
We do not regret hearing it. That's a great story. And along those lines, is there, and I don't know if this exists for you, but is there a line you won't cross for a laugh?
I won't poop on the rug. And I don't. And I could never and would never. anything that feels bad in my guts, you know, anything that feels not nice or I don't like to.
It's good advice. It's good advice.
Go with my gut.
And obviously, we'll jump forward a few years to the present. There are a lot of other acting jobs in that time and performances. We don't have time to get into all of them. The Aristocrats is one of my favorites, but that's for another night. So this film, and I think you've been promoting this film and talking about it for almost a year. I think we first talked to you at Sundance, and you've remained incredibly enthusiastic, really, and this is a testament to you, just as enthusiastic in January as you are now. And it shows how much you care about this movie, and we can tell. And I was wondering, what was your biggest fear in taking this job?
Failing it, you know, not doing it justice or not doing well, I guess. Not more than anything, being cold. I don't like being cold. Just
I mean, literally cold.
being cold. There was a lot of stuff outside and it was cold. I have a fear of not having fun. Like I go, oh, this is like not fun, you know. And then I had told myself, well, in between action and cut, we can have fun. It's a heavy movie, but like Laney doesn't know she's in a heavy movie. And then between we'll laugh and we'll have inside jokes, but I was wrong. And I'm so glad I didn't know I was wrong about that because ahead of time I would have, if I had known it ahead of time, I would have tried to get out of it. And I'm so glad I didn't because I learned that there are other fulfilling things besides fun. And it was exhilarating, and I'm trying not to use the word challenging because I feel like it's trite, but I guess it's trite because it's true. And I, you know, I always think of this quote that Charlie Kaufman said, I mean, almost daily. It fortifies me so much because he said, you know, don't fear failure. Failure is a badge of honor. It means you risked failure. So that always gives me some.
He's a smart man. He's a very smart man. And did you have a particular scene or day of shooting that, I mean, the whole movie is quite trying for you as a performer, but was there a specific scene that you felt really tested you in ways that you were kind of surprised you?
Not really, because that's always ends up, I think the true answer always ends up being surprising or not what you'd think, because it's like, I feel like I'm supposed to say like the teddy bear scene or like the scene at the end, but those scenes were so exciting for me and so exhilarating, and I felt were so important, you know, and to jump into something that has any taboo stuck to it is exhilarating to me. That's turns all my lights on. So I liked that stuff, you know. And also the stuff that was internal was exhilarating for me because it's like I get to use kind of different muscles that are just having layers to them, where she's feeling so many things but she's also feeling nothing, and she feels so much of one, you know, she feels so much and yet she covers it all so expertly, and then so that stuff is fun. It's, you know, I mean, ultimately it's pretending, you know, you use all the resources you can and you figure things out and you make choices and then you throw all that away, and ultimately you're left with just pretending this as if it's real. You know, I've been asked, you know, did you ever want to do drama before? And I said, well, yeah, I remember asking my agents, like, how about me for dramatic roles? And they said, well, we don't have any tape on you. And I was like, well, but how do people do their first thing ever, you know? And I said, what about the Aristocrats? Because to me, that's a dramatic scene. She doesn't know she's in a comedy. She's talking about being raped.
And keeping a straight face. It feels like really feels like a performance
To me, it was. Yeah. So, and they just scoffed. But to me, there isn't much difference if you're playing material honestly, you know.
And in what ways would you say different and similar to Laney?
I have glimmers of Laney in that Laney is always existing in the state of anxiety, you know, that state of, you're either, you know, they say if you live in the past, that's depression, and if you live in the future, that's anxiety, and that's why ideally as our perfect selves, our happiest selves, it's just to be in the moment. And I'm dying. And we all are, slowly, at some point. She exists in the future, in anxiety, in that state of what if. What if I ruin my kids? What if I pass my genes on to them? What if I abandon them? What if I... And we all tell ourselves horror stories, you know. What if I never write another joke? What if I never fall in love again? What if... But she really exists in that place, and there's no room for anything else if you don't have space for hope. Or, you know, people always say that I feel like people misconstrue their self-hatred as some kind of modesty. And it's not, it's self-obsession. There's no room for anything else. Have you ever hung out with people who hate themselves? I have, because I'm a comedian and all my friends are comedians. And there's just no space for anything else except for how much they hate this, and this about themselves.
Do you try to distance yourself from those people? I know it's
no,
hard.
well, comics are my world and my
Right.
life, but you
Kinda
know,
hard to,
hopefully
probably.
you either grow. It's like schoolmates. You either grow up together or kind of alongside each other, or apart. You know, but yeah, there's no room for anything else when you're just completely obsessing about your own self-loathing and the what ifs and. You know, like it's funny because there are odd parallels between like my comedy or my last special. Bless you.
You gave me Ebola.
Don't say I never gave you anything. And this because, you know, I say like, never mind. Timing's all off. Sneeze, Mr. Sneeze.
Has this role, which I would say is career redefining for you, I think we would all agree, maybe people will see you in a different light, even though we all knew you could do this. We did. I think we all knew. But I think it takes the business a long time to see people in a new light, and I think this is the kind of movie that will allow them to do that.
Isn't it odd that it is so rare in this business of creativity that for someone to imagine somebody in a way they haven't already seen them before? Like,
yeah. Yes, the imagination factor is a little low on that front. Yeah. Has playing this role changed the way you approach comedy or changed the way you think about being funny?
Yes and no, I guess, because just in the way that all experiences kind of feed the comedy I do, and also to me this movie is like interesting stuff to me. Like I'm interested in that stuff, and so I like talking about it and breaking it down, and I, you know, things about the movie change for me as time goes by, and I like that about a movie, and what was the question? You know, like someone at one of these screenings, there was a psychiatrist who deals only in addiction, and he told me about the concept of the high before the high, and how there's that high when you know you're gonna get high. And that made so much sense to me. Suddenly, I realized you make a certain amount of decisions going into the movie or while you're shooting it, but it doesn't mean you can't change your mind subsequently after everything's been shot and it's already on iTunes. You know, like I said, oh, of course why would she go see her father? Why would she do that? She knows it's going to be a disaster. Nothing good can come of it because she knows she'll be able to get high after. It's the high before the high. She knows, not consciously, that if she goes there, she's going to be able to get high because she'll be triggered. So that just put a whole new light on that. I like art. I like being able to that things change with each time you know, what is that story where the guy goes and looks at the same painting every day and they're like, why are you looking at the same painting every day? Because his life changes and then what he's seeing changes, and I think that's so far out.
And speaking of art, I feel like comedians are having a tough time these days with ultra sensitivity and social media. It's becoming harder to tell jokes without potentially, I guess, making people feel uncomfortable. There was a particularly fascinating / scary article in The Atlantic a few months ago where people talked about comedians not being able to visit campuses and rooms set aside for people who may have felt threatened by a joke. And it made me feel really sad. And I'm wondering how does this reality affect the way you perform, and have you changed your approach, if at all?
No,
Or have you experienced this personally? Maybe you haven't.
you know, I don't have that problem, that whole article in The Atlantic, and the thing that Jerry, who I obviously worship, you know, but he said, oh, I'm sick of it, the PC, blah, blah, blah. And I get it, I'm not trying, but to me, first of all, students tend to be on the right side of history in general. It's not that I like changing with new information. I like being changed. I had a kind of enlightening moment for me where I was like, I say gay. I'm from Boston. I have gay friends. I'm not saying gay like that. I'm just saying it like it's lame, like gay. And then all of a sudden I realized I was the guy going, I say colored. I have colored friends. What's the big deal? It's a word. Oh, no, what is it now? You're so put out by a word changing or having to stay current with what's going on in the world. And it took me about 4 hours to come up with other things than gay to say when I think something is lame. And
Like what? What are the substitutions we can use?
cheesy, lame, cornball. Don't put pressure on me. I don't know.
We came here to learn, Sarah. We came here to learn.
Douche nozzle. I don't know. But it really isn't hard to change with the times. If you don't want to, that is absolutely your prerogative, and I support you completely. I do think it means you're old. What bothers me on college campuses, I mean, sometimes it's just a totally inspiring, amazing experience. What sucks for me is just a sea of cell phones, because stand-up is just so much about connection and the moment and it being live, and it's really a group sport, even though there's only one person on the stage. And when you're just looking at it sucks for me to just be talking to a sea of, you know, empty vessels through which Facebook expresses itself.
Amen to that. What advice would you give yourself at, say, age 22 that you wish you had known to maybe make your journey a little bit easier? Or maybe advice you'd give people who are starting out at that same age, either in comedy or just in acting in general?
I would say stay the course, keep your head down, and just do what you love doing. I mean, you can always change the course. I mean, I would say make a plan, and then you can always change your plan, but it can be paralyzing to just have all these desires and then not think of any kind of way. I say just keep your head down and do what you love doing. Get your 10,000 hours in. That's that Malcolm Gladwell thing. But it really is true. Like, so many people out here, they're like, I want to get seen. You know, they're comics and they're young and they're like, well, I want to have agents see me or this people see me. I go, don't have anybody see you. When you're ready to be seen, people will be talking about you and they'll come see you. You can get seen too soon, but never too late. So, yeah, well, just because being out here, I mean, honestly, people can come see you and go like, oh, I saw him, he's not strong, blah, blah, blah. And then 6 months later, you figured that skeleton key out of, you know, just, if you love doing stand-up, do stand-up and don't worry about getting seen. And same with acting. I mean, I've came through this through stand-up, and that's always kind of been an easier way to be seen. And you can always tell actors that decide to do stand-up to be seen because they just like write a monologue and like say it, and they're not comics. But
It's because they want a sitcom, so they want to.
yeah, and also just like I feel like for so long I thought, well, then I do this, and then I'm supposed to want this, and I'm supposed to want this, and you have to ask yourself what you want and what makes you happy, because success is different for everybody, you know? And if you want to be successful by how other people decide what success is, then that's not really a happy life, you know? I keep my overhead low. That's the thing I always say. Keep your overhead low. You don't need a fancy purse. It's a bag. Get a backpack. You're being ridiculous. You know, you get a car that works, a Toyota or a Honda, you know, don't have stuff you have to. I'm like James Spader in Sex and the City. I only want one key. I live in an apartment. I own my car. I own my apartment, and I can do anything I want. You know, I'm not beholden to any payments of any kind, so I can make videos on my couch, which I love just as much as making a movie, which I love just as much as, you know, being on TV or tweeting, or I just like expressing myself in different ways, and I like embracing new things and seeing if I like it or not, you know.
And who are the people who most inspire you creatively?
Well, so many creative people. I mean, named a bunch of them, and then also like Mr. Rogers, and my therapist, and my sisters, and people who are smart, who I like hearing all sorts of opinions on things, and yeah.
It's a good list.
I feel I could go on, but I also feel like I have been going on.
Well, let's segue to some audience questions. Adriana would like to know, well, first she wanted to wish you a happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Where is Adriana?
I have a big comedian's birthday.
You do? Who
Yeah,
else?
December 1st. Me. I start with me. It's not grammatically correct, though. Woody Allen, Richard Pryor, Bette
Wow.
Midler, Larry Charles,
Wow.
Jonathan Katz.
Wow. Happy birthday to all of you. Adriana would like to know what process, I'm assuming acting process, do you have, and how do you feel it has developed through the years?
You know, I approach different things differently. You know, with this, I had myself for resource. I had a lot of close friends as resource for addiction. I have my own desperation around children that I was able to easily channel with Laney's kids, because she loves them so much, and I love kids so much, but you can smell the desperation and the anxiety, and kids feel that. You know, she blames herself for her son getting this tic. In my opinion, it is her fault. It did transfer to him. Energy is like matter. It's real, and it's when you're like this around your kid, I love you so much, you know, it's terrifying. And what was the question? Oh my God, I'm like floating
your
in
acting
space.
process and how,
You know, one
whether
time-
it's learning lines or actually how you absorb the script, or how has that changed or evolved?
You know, I break it up, I think about it, I make some choices, then I throw it all away. You know, to me, I always like being very, very, very prepared, actually, and knowing lines like in a muscle memory way, so that I can throw it all out, and then I can be loose. It's actually, the more prepared you are, the looser you can be, I find, for me. So I like that. I like being very prepared, and I like, because I like to be able to be loose. And then I find it easy, once I've done a lot of stuff for it, to just pretend as if this were real. I mean, it's funny because you can get in your head about acting, and I went to like a fancy acting teacher out here, and I went to NYU for a year for drama, and but I got like one of my first acting roles was a 2-part Star Trek Voyager. And I went to this, so I had like a private session with an acting coach, this acting coach I was taking lessons with, and he's looking at the script and breaking it down, and finally he goes, look, sometimes when you're running from lasers, you just have to pretend you're running from lasers. And I was like, it was so freeing. It was such a license to go like, yeah, a lot of this is pretend. It's pretend.
I love that. And Anna would like to know if you are interested in directing after this project, if it's inspired you to get behind the camera.
You know, I've always been in, I am interested in directing because I know that I have, a lot of times I know exactly what it should be and how it should look if it's something that I came up with and want to do. And I never did because I'm lazy as fuck, and I am just like, director has to be up the earliest and they're gone the latest, and like I need sleep and some Law and Order time, and I love a bath. But lately I've been like, I feel like, oh, well, but then it's, you know, acting is so hurry up and wait, you know, and all that stuff. It's like, well, there's no downtime if you're directing, so maybe I would like it because your mind is being used the whole time. You're not just like trying to, you know, go on Twitter or do something to occupy your time. That's why so many actors knit. I knit a little, but I can only do one row, like just scarves and blankets that are this wide.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but if you ever need a room full of actors, these are big fans.
You know, I
so.
feel, yeah, I didn't know. I thought it was going to be like this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
When I
guys.
talk about the movie. Thank you for coming.